Oh, we're live. Hey, welcome to yet another Ask Us Anything. Today we are talking about Kubernetes. Any question about Kubernetes, which we might or might not be able to answer, we'll see. And if you run out of ideas about Kubernetes, it can be about anything, right? That's the beauty of it. So start typing your questions. We already have a couple of questions in the pipeline, and we're going to start answering them right away. No time to waste. So, from Jerome, I'm looking for a GitOps-based tool to manage promotion of Helm charts through UAT prod stages in a multi-tenant way using namespaces, separate clusters, or both. Any suggestions? So, typically, you would be using Argo CD or Flux, most likely. And that means that promotion means that you're not touching your Helm charts. Or at least that's how I do it. You are modifying Argo CD or Flux manifests. In, let's say, Argo CD manifest, you have you can specify the image, and you just change the tag to the tag that you want, and you push it, right? There is Argo CD application manifest for one environment, for another environment, and so on and so forth. And that manifest is doing two things. First, pointing to the Helm chart, wherever the Helm chart is, and whichever version of the Helm chart you want to use, and then overwriting the values that are specific for that environment. So you're not touching Helm charts for promotions to environments. You're modifying Argo CD application or manifests or Flux equivalent. And that's about it. And those manifests have instructions where that application should be deployed. Where is the environment? What is the cluster? What is the namespace? And so on and so forth. If I don't answer fully the question, or you have follow-up questions, just shoot. And I'll go deeper. Let's see. What's next? Oh, I think that Darin should jump in for this one.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and read it. So can you please talk about Jenkins in Kubernetes? Is having a hybrid setup where the Jenkins controller is separate from the cluster and running only the build jobs a good approach? The short answer for that is it depends. Good consulting answer. That's the way I prefer it. You can run Jenkins inside of the Kubernetes cluster if you want. There's no problem with that. But and that's if you're doing it new, but if you're already got an existing Jenkins controller setting outside, running in a VM or whatever it is, then just use Kubernetes as your build agents. In fact, I've got a video for that. I'll put it down in the chat, and you can watch that whenever you want. But I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way to do it. I'll just say it this way: just use Jenkins. I had to get it in there, right? I had to say it at least. And you're muted if you're talking.
Oh, yeah. I was laughing in a positive way. Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so let's move on to the next one.
Can you explain why we need folder var lib kubelet pod folder in on-premise servers? To begin with, you need it no matter whether it's on-premise or not. That's where the information about the pods is. And if you are having trouble with space, that's because that's where the volumes are. And depending on the type of the volume you have, it might occupy very little space or more space. But what you shouldn't do definitely is delete it. So do not delete those folders. Take a look at what's inside. Take a look at the volumes you're having. That's probably what is occupying space. And then decide whether you can get rid of those volumes or not. How to update Kubernetes objects like CPU and memory via Python scripts. Any examples, please? So I don't have a ready-to-go examples for Python, mostly because I haven't been using Python in a while. But the logic is always the same, doesn't matter the language. You can either interact directly with API, and that means that let me backtrack for a second. You need to define YAML that has the information you need, including CPU and memory, and then that YAML should either could be directly streamed to kube API, or you can store it in a file and then do kubectl apply or Argo CD something and so on and so forth. Alternative to that, and you should do that. So always generate the manifests, store them in Git, please, 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 and then just apply those manifests. Now, whether you generate manifests with Python or with something else, it's up to you, really. What you can do as alternative is execute from Python equivalent of kubectl edit to just edit something that is already in a cluster and add memory or CPU. But please, please, please don't do that. That sounds like, hey, cool, I can just edit. I can just add stuff to my existing resources in a Kubernetes cluster, but that's a recipe for disaster. You want to track what you're doing, and you track that by storing the manifests in Git. How do you write design docs in DevOps world? If so, what tools do you use, or does pen and paper suffice? Pen and paper is not good because it's difficult to share. You need to scan it, right? And then kind of share images with the rest of your team. And those images are hard to edit, right? So how do you collaborate on that design and so on and so forth? How do you modify that design later? So don't use pen and paper. I'm a freak about Markdown. I like doing everything in Markdown. And you can even design graphics in Markdown. I forgot, Darren.
Mermaid?
What is the name? My brain's toast.
Mermaid?
Mermaid, yes. Mermaid, yes. But that's me. I like Markdown, if not any kind of vector drawing. Draw.io, for example, is something that I used in the past and use still. As long as it's editable and you can export it as a picture. If somebody wants a picture, you should be fine. Any tips for speeding up development of Kubernetes? Unit testing is very helpful, but sometimes you need manual testing of the code. Build, deploy, test, back to code cycle is slow. I don't think that this is specific to Kubernetes. I mean, code, build, deploy, test, back to code. That's not directly related to Kubernetes, and I don't think that using Kubernetes is going to make that slower than whatever you had before Kubernetes. So if Kubernetes is the reason why it's slow, then you're probably doing something wrong. If anything, Kubernetes should speed up things. Now, I cannot tell you what you're doing wrongly, if that's the reason. I don't know the code base. But going back to code build, deploy, test, back to code, that's pipelines, right? Pipelines are doing that. Maybe not, with the exception of maybe deploy, that you might want to do with GitOps tools, but pipelines are doing code build, test for you. And if it's slow, it's slow because your builds are not optimized or because your tests are too slow, and that will stay the same no matter where you're running it. We have pods which have Alpine image to run application, but whenever we face some issues with troubleshoot network and any container doesn't have those utilities, how do you troubleshoot in this case? Recent versions of Kubernetes, I don't remember from top of my head which one, but recent have debug containers now. So you can attach containers to your pods that will have the tools that you need without sacrificing the size of the real ones.
I want to jump in on this. That is a very, very big deal. You want those runtime containers to be as trim as possible. You don't want to package all the debug tools. And now that you can just basically sidecar in with the debug tools, that's the way to do it.
Exactly. But that's kind of the same even before Kubernetes, right? You don't want to, let's say that you're deploying your application on a VM. You don't want your application to be in debug mode all the time. You want to be able to add debugging when needed, and preferably not in production. And also, before you start troubleshooting by adding debugging container, Make sure that you have all the information you might need as metrics, as logs, as tracing. And then if none of those things help, then you attach the debug container. Hello, is there a way of mitigating DDoS attack on Kubernetes apps? I'm not aware of anything specific to Kubernetes, except locking down Kubernetes to begin with. But you cannot lock it completely because somebody needs to access Kubernetes applications somehow from outside. Otherwise, what's the point of applications? So what actually, I'm now when I think about it, what I'm saying is not correct. Yes, if you use EST or Linkerd, you can set up the rules that will mitigate DDoS attack. You can set up quotas. You can set up breakpoints. You can prevent people certain sources from overwhelming the system. So try out Service Mesh, Linkerd or EST or any of the others. Most of them have the mechanism to do that. What can be used for load balancing between two different Kubernetes clusters? Is there a suggested tool? Not that I know, nothing specific, right? Just a load balancer as you would normally use, or on a CDN level. Do you home lab? No. It's one of those things that I have it on my list to do, and then never got time for it. I'm too lazy with having cloud accounts everywhere, and then whenever I need something, I just spin it up in Google or Azure or AWS or DigitalOcean. I'd like to do that. I just didn't find time. Oh, wait, before we continue, let me do my dance. Yeah, hey, subscribe to the channel. Oh, it doesn't work. Subscribe. Oh, okay. All my stuff, all my animations to subscribe to the channel and join the channel and do the dance that we do with YouTube are gone. I need to check out why it's gone. It doesn't work anymore. So, without animations, please subscribe to the channel, like this video. Now let's continue with the question. Hey guys, with reality of massive tool sprawl, etc., when you can just go to Azure DevOps and get most of what you need, why would enterprises want to build their own, thinking day to overhead management, etc.? So first of all, I don't think that enterprises, depends what you mean by build their own. If by build their own you mean literally from scratch, I think that that's silly. Unless you are Google or Netflix, right? Kind of one of the few companies that are ahead of what exists. So if you're not one of those, I don't think that you should build your own from scratch. Now, you do need to adapt the tools to your processes. So you cannot just say out of the box works for me. I never saw that in bigger organizations because you have your processes, you have your ways of working and so on and so forth. And whatever you get through your service providers is either very opinionated, and then you need to choose only those that work exactly as you want them, or they're building blocks. Azure is a set of building blocks. They have very few services that are useful out of the box without you adding anything to them, right? Azure DevOps itself, you still need to write pipelines. You still need to do stuff. Just don't do it from scratch. Hi, could you talk about multi-zone clusters, please? In my case, I have a PC as a single node cluster and I want to connect to another cluster for heavy computing. So it's a bit misleading. When you say multi-zone clusters, that usually means clusters that are one cluster that is distributed across multiple zones. But I guess that, and then you have another cluster in multiple zones, regional clusters, right? But judging by the second part of your comment, that's not what you're looking for. So if you want to connect to another cluster, usually you're going to use some sort of, probably service mesh. sometimes the vendor that you're using is going to give it to you, like Google Cloud goes with Anthos to connect clusters, or you can do it yourself with Blinkerd or Istio, for example. What is the best way to create? Hey, thank you for subscribing, Sherilyn. What is the best way to create services of type load balancer on-prem Kubernetes cluster? Shall I have some hardware LB F5 that would flow the traffic to the cluster? So you need to install the controller of your favorite load balancer, right? So I would expect that if you're using F5, for example, F5 has a controller that you install, and through that controller, when service is a load balancer type, it will know to go to F5 and open the ports and do whatever needs to be done. Now, many people using public cloud do not notice those things because that's already pre-configured in their clusters. But in your case, yeah, you go to F5 and install the package that will enable it to do that. Assuming that F5 has it. I'm not using F5, so I'm not 100% sure, but let's say that almost certainly they have it. Thanks for answering. Building Docker and deploying to Kubernetes is much slower than most local environments that allow for breakpoints and hot reloading. Try telepresent, but it's a bit limited. So I'm not sure whether test last you're referring to deploying to production or to development environment. If you're talking about deploying to production, then you're not going to do hot reloading or breakpoints. But yeah, I see now most local environments.
This was from the earlier question. Yeah, this was the code build deploy
local
cycle.
Environment. Yeah, you have tools that will synchronize your code with containers, be it Docker or any other type of containers. So I have a couple of them in this channel, and my brain now stopped. Oh man,
DevSpace?
I need to.
Was DevSpace one of them?
Yes. See,
okay.
Doesn't work today. DevSpace is one of them. Yes. So the point is just you spin up a container and then you synchronize the code, right? That's it. Best practice to secure a Kubernetes cluster, especially in authentication. The best way to secure your cluster is to lock it up completely. Oh, thanks, Thomas, for joining. Thank you so much. So, and that's the... Actually, we recorded yesterday, right, a podcast, which I don't know when it will be released, specifically on that subject. So you might want to check a few weeks from now or months, the DevOps Paradox podcast with Loki. That's the name of the guy. Anyways, the first thing, lock your cluster. Use GitOps. That's one of the many advantages of GitOps. GitOps is a pool-based mechanism. So instead of you pushing something to your cluster, that's inherently insecure because then you need to open ports for that something to push information to your cluster. You install Argo CD or Flux that is pulling stuff from your Git repository and applying it, synchronizing. And in that case, excluding the cases of emergency, you do not need to be authenticated to your Kubernetes cluster. You need to think about the RBAC in your Git repositories. So lock it up, RBAC in Git. Buildpacks are Docker file for production. Okay, to begin with, I would never say for production. It's like whatever you use it for all environments. It would be silly to use Buildpacks for one and Docker for another, because then you get completely different results. Don't do that. It depends. I like Buildpacks are easier. You don't need to think about Docker file. And there is advantage of Buildpacks being able to somebody in your organization can create Buildpacks specific for the types of the applications you have in your company, right? So it's almost like you can have an ops person creating your own Buildpacks that would be similar, like base Docker images or base container images. On the other hand, I think that Dockerfile is fairly easy, straightforward. So I don't see a big deal writing it. The advantage I see with Dockerfile is that you can keep it together with the source code of your application, so you have the full information of what something is. But I'm undecided. Both are cool. Hello, single repo for manifests of all the apps, or each repo keeps its own manifests only? Thank you. Personally, I prefer both. I prefer having manifests of an application in a repo of that application. That simplifies many things. That means that you can deploy locally, for example, without going to a different repository. You have all information in one place and so on and so forth. So manifests, in my case, are in a repository of an application. However, and that's why I said both, then I have a repository for each environment, production, staging, whatever. And those repositories have almost exclusively, only Argo CD manifests that are pointing to the repository of an application and overwriting values of those manifests with those that are specific to that environment. So base manifests in up repo, and then one repo for each environment that overwrites and points to those manifests. In my case. Touch with KD. To enable GitOps with Kubernetes, is it a good idea to use a single branch strategy or multi-branch strategy, like one branch for each environment? I do not like a multi-branch at all. I think that branches are meant to be mergeable to the main line. Generally speaking, nothing to do with GitOps, what I'm saying now. When you create a branch, it's something that exists temporarily and then goes back to the main line, right? In general. Now, if that makes sense, then having long-lived branches for environments that are not mergeable to the main line is not something that I do or I think is useful. And when I say not mergeable, because you rarely want to say everything that is currently in staging goes to production. You want to promote each application individually, so you cannot really merge the branch to the main line when you want to promote to production, assuming that production is your main line. So, single branch strategy, and within that single branch, either you have different directories or you have different repositories for each environment. I tend to use different repositories for each environment, but directories are okay. And then you create branches as a way to kind of to validate, pull requests, maybe run some tests, do something until you commit to that environment, whatever the environment is, and committing means merging to the mainline. Again, people do things differently, right? What I say that works for me does not necessarily means that it works for you. Hi, an APM for a workload running on Kubernetes. Okay, my brain is definitely not working today. APM is application...
Performance management. Datadog, New Relic.
Okay, yes. So, if you can use SUSE, use SUSE. Oh, Bikil Boy, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. And everybody else, if I missed you. So, if you can use SUSE, it's one less thing to worry about. So use Datadog or whichever other monitoring as a service tool there is. Now, if you want to self-host, and since we're talking about Kubernetes, Prometheus is unavoidable. Simply because many of the tools that depend on metrics will assume by default, will start with Prometheus and then maybe later expand to some other tools. Like Argo rollouts. I'm not sure now, but when it started, especially at least, it was only based on Prometheus. Flagger, again, started with Prometheus, later on extended to others. But if you don't use Prometheus when you're self-hosting, you might not be able to use quite a few tools in Kubernetes, because they assume Prometheus by default. So Prometheus, and then if you need to scale it, if you're talking about large scale, then Thanos. And of course, for self-hosting, there's Grafana. Personally, I prefer Loki for logs. And what else is missing there? And for tracing Grafana stuff as well. Again, my brain stopped. What's the
Jaeger.
Grafana tracing one?
Jaeger.
Huh?
Jaeger.
Yeah,
Jaeger.
no, it works with Jaeger. It works with Jaeger or Jaeger or whatever it's called. But I was thinking about Tempo.
Oh.
So, if you had to pick a GitOps tool forever, what would you choose? Argo CD or Flux? If possible, explain why. Argo CD. If I would, so you're putting me on a spot here, right? I don't think that I'm ready to pick a tool forever. But if I would have to, Argo CD. It has a really good UI. And it has a massive community.
Wait, did you just pick something
But you're
based on
putting
it
me on a
being?
spot, man.
Are you picking something based on it having a good UI? Is a pig flying
Yes.
overhead? I'm shocked.
No, I love good UIs for observing stuff. I don't want to observe things in terminal, right? So I'm not going to watch metrics in terminal, and that Argo CD is not metrics, but being able to see your resource and how it connects to other resources and those to see a tree of resources and their statuses is great. Now, there is an option over there, unless they removed it, create a new application. That never. But for observing, Argo CD UI is good. What is a smart and not an overkill approach to hide Kubernetes API for public access? Is a VPN a good idea? The best idea to hide Kubernetes API from public access is not to give anybody access and use GitOps. And maybe and then enable it only in read-only mode, kind of like metrics, yes. Kind of like go to Prometheus or Grafana or Loki or whatever.
What if you were to use something like OpenZD, or what was the what's the company behind it? It's an N word. NetFoundry, which they give a free tier. Like something like if you need that kind of access, having that work seems a lot more sane.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure whether they work on the Kubernetes API level. I'm not 100% sure.
No, but you could have Kubernetes. I imagine Kubernetes would just be an app at that point that would show up in ZD. So I don't know. I haven't tried it. So
yeah, and alternative to ZD, if you do still not want to lock it up and use GitOps and stuff like that, and observe through other tools like Grafana, try Teleport. That's alternative to. I'm not sure whether it's alternative to ZD, but that's the one I'm familiar with, and it works fairly well. And by the way, if it's for learning purposes, free tier. If it's for learning purposes, don't try to hide it or lock it. Don't waste your time on that. If it's for learning purposes, just use it and use some silly demo applications. Recommendations for managing multiple bare metal Kubernetes clusters. Also, any general tips about bare metal? I mean, you know, if you can choose any bare metal clusters, then I would go for a service like Equinix Metal. They really, because, so let me backtrack for a second. My theory. We all jumped to virtual services and after that to cloud like AWS, Google, Azure. Not because it's virtual services, but because the APIs and the services and the ability to manage everything through APIs. Now we're getting the same thing with bare metal. Equinix Metal is a good example, right? So I can get a server like this, just as I would get a virtual machine like this. And then I'm starting to question, hey, if you get the server whenever you need it, whichever type of the server you need, and you can manipulate it using the API just like you would do with VMs, then I'm not even sure whether we need VMs in the first place. But yeah, if you can choose where Equinix Metal, if you cannot choose, then you need to find a provider that will give you the API to manage your clusters on-prem, if it's on-prem. Without API, I don't want to work. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm trying to set up VPS cluster using VPN. I'm not sure what VPS is. Probably my brain is still not functioning today. Advisor setting up. What is VPS?
Virtual private servers.
Ah, man. Okay. I'm definitely out of my game today. Advisor setting up Ingress and exposing services via load balancer. Also, should I use private VPN, IP, and reverse proxy to use VPN? I'm not in that game that much, to be honest, to give you good advice. I'm having less and less contact with private something on-prem. Not a good person to answer. I don't know whether you, Darren, have any suggestion, better suggestion than no suggestion.
My question would be, why are you trying to build out your own cluster? Because, especially on VPSs, I mean, if you're using VPS, unless you're locked into a specific provider, that would be the only reason I could think you would be doing that. But, I mean, it's tough to justify doing that when things like CIVO exists or digital. I mean, because if I'm doing a VPS, when I hear VPS, I'm thinking Linode, DigitalOcean, those types of providers. And today, all of those have their own managed Kubernetes service.
Yeah, I somehow assumed, and maybe I was wrong by the question, that we are talking about setting it up yourself. But if it's Linode, then yes.
I'm saying if it's that type of provider, because again, if I hear VPS, I'm thinking those low to mid-tier providers. And nothing against Linode or DigitalOcean, but it's not the hyperscales of AWS or Google. So that's... And the backside of it is, should you use a private VPN, IP, and reverse proxy, or VPS? I would, so in my case on that, because that's where I spend a lot of my time, it would all be private IP on the VPN. I wouldn't expose anything. The public IPs on those VPSs, I would completely deny all once the VPN is set up. That's what I would do. That's effectively, in an AWS perspective, that's like having a private subnet. I don't want anything on the public side. So that's what I would do. Let's go to the next one. You ready?
Yes.
And you said all your animations are dead, right? Because
all my animations are dead, but yes, subscribe and like the video and join the channel. Do all the stuff that you do. Thank you. And already we got a couple of members, and that's really awesome. Rancher and Nerdcuttle works great on my local Kubernetes cluster. Excellent. How can I create pods that will automatically be updated after push to master? Is that only possible with Argo CD? I mean, first, no, it's not possible only with Argo CD. You can have pipelines pushing it to there or other GitOps tools. But I'm not sure whether you want to do that. Really kind of like if it's local environment. I'm assuming that we're talking about you developing. And typically, at least when I work, I do not deploy things while developing from some Git repository. I just push directly from my laptop to that local environment, right? Using Tilt or Scaffold or any of the dozens of similar tools that help you do development better. Now, if you're talking about third part, I mean, other dependent applications, those that not the one that you're working on, then I mean, you can do it. You can do as simple as kubectl apply from that repo, local repo, kind of locally cloned repo. I do not bother setting up Argo CD or pipelines when developing locally. I think that's overhead, right? Because kubectl apply just does the thing you need. It's not good enough for production, right? For real environments, for local ones, kubectl apply. How to speed up Argo CD syncing time on Git commits? You can change the sync time, I think by default it's every 3 minutes, I think the loop. You can change that to any other time. Now don't go crazy, kind of like every half a second or something like that. But when you deploy Argo CD, you can, if you're using like Helm chart, there is a value that allows you to change the sync time. I'm becoming more and more convinced that many Kubernetes clusters, EKS, is the way to go. Yes. However, I'm worried about the maintenance. Should I not be worried? Are you confident with EKS upgrade stats? So EKS is not my favorite Kubernetes. I'm a GKE guy. But AWS is stable in general, and then I haven't seen really the only thing I've seen is that it's a bit behind, that you cannot get latest and greatest, which is probably a good thing if you're talking about stability. But it's stable, really. And that's actually a good use case for GitOps, right? It helps with all those things, helps managing many clusters. Now, actually, that's not true. That's not GitOps. But yeah, assuming that you have infrastructure as code, Terraform, Pulumi, something shouldn't be a big deal, especially if you start creating modules and then instead of repeating yourself, it's relatively straightforward. Use Crossplane. This is a plug. I work for Crossplane. It makes it even better, at least from my perspective. But yes, as long as you have it in Git and you have a mechanism to synchronize it, and as long as you create some kind of encapsulation, some kind of module so that 20 clusters do not have exactly the same code, but only the differences between those clusters, you should be fine. What is the emerging solution for observability, logs, tracing, metrics? What do you think about Grafana, Prometheus, Loki, Promptail, OpenTelemetry? I think yes. I think, yeah, man. I mean, I like Grafana, I like Prometheus, Loki, Promptail. That's my favorite stack. And OpenTelemetry is becoming a thing. So yes, that's what I think. Thoughts on VictoriaMetrics? Should companies seriously think about moving to VictoriaMetrics? I don't have enough experience with VictoriaMetrics to say that. I simply, I have rudimentary knowledge experience with it, and I don't like commenting on things that I'm not confident with. What is your best tool for multi-cluster management on-prem cloud? Crossplane. That's what's my, again, I work in Upbound. I work on daily basis with Crossplane, so you can call me biased, but the reason why I joined Crossplane is precisely because I think that that's the way to go. Can you check wait for started request to be finalized because before switching backend in case of a blue-green deployment? So, yes, and that's not even blue-green deployment. That's how containers work. That's how pods work. So when you use blue-green, right, what happens is that it starts redirecting traffic to the new release. But, and once it starts redirecting all new traffic to the new release, Kubernetes itself sends SIG-term signal to your containers. And it waits until your processes in your containers respond with OK. And that means that your application receives SIG-term signal, waits until the existing requests are processed, right? So new requests are going to the new release, but the existing requests are being processed, and then your application, your process, this is on you, right? Responds back to that SIG-term signal saying, OK. And then Kubernetes shuts down those containers. So you're being asked, your application is being asked, is it OK to shut down this container? And if it's not, tell me when it is. And to make it clear, this is not a container-specific practice. This is Linux practice. all applications, no matter where they're running, should be implementing sync term signals, responding to sync term. That's the way how typically you request shutdown of something and then wait for the response that it's okay to shut it down. And that's your opportunity to process existing requests. My org is in the life science industry. I don't think our team is large enough to manage our own Kubernetes clusters. When do you recommend to go to manage Kubernetes versus serverless containers? If you're small, go for, and if the cost is not an issue, because serverless tends to cost more, but that cost can easily be justified by saving on people. So yeah, go with serverless containers. Google Cloud Run is absolutely awesome. Azure Container Apps is getting there. AWS, what do they have? I mean, Lambda, I don't like Lambda myself.
15 different things.
But they have also, 15 or 50, nobody knows. Yeah. Different solutions. But yes, if you're okay, somebody else manage your infra and you just say, here's my image, run it. That's the perfect solution. Just go always for easier option. Now, when you grow big, then your requirements tend to be more specific than those services might give you. The cost might be an issue. You're huge, you have already a team of people and stuff like that, and that rule might not apply. But yeah, Google Cloud Run, go for it. It's me again with the plan to build a platform team. Have you ever seen a good coexistence to an old-fashioned data center team? I mean, platform team is all about building services that others can consume, right? Platform team is doing very similar to work to what AWS is doing for Ops, right? Or Azure or Google. So it's about creating services that others can consume. I need a VM, I need to deploy my application, I need an easy way to create a pipeline, I need this, I need that. And then the job of a platform team is to make it flexible enough to fulfill the needs of the rest of the people in the company, and easy enough that nobody needs to think much about it. The place where most platform teams fail, from what I've seen in the past, is that they're not treating the rest of the company as customers, not fulfilling their needs, but the needs that they think that people have. Usually you need some kind of competition, maybe multiple teams and stuff like that. But yes, that platform teams are creating services that others consume, fulfilling their needs. And whether it's an old-fashioned data center or a new funky something, doesn't matter really. If you need to do something on a mainframe, then you do something on a mainframe. The logic is still the same from the platform team perspective. You're simplifying, enabling others to be self-sufficient. That could be a good definition.
Hey, we had a super chat from Rohit. Let's go ahead and get his question up here.
Hey! Thank you.
Why is pause containers? And we also have a super sticker from Matthias too, so thanks for that.
Oh.
But for a question for Rohit, what's the pause container? Why is pause containers created on worker nodes?
I'm not sure what you mean, Rahit. I mean, all containers are created on worker nodes.
Paused containers. Why would a container be created and then go right into a pause state? Do you know? I've not seen that before.
I have no idea. What are the pause containers? You got me. I have no idea. It's a container which holds the network namespace for the pod. Kubernetes creates code to acquire respective. Okay, I had no idea. This is the first. This is when I'm learning about pause containers right now. I don't know. I need to get informed. Pause is a secret container. This container's primary job is to keep that namespace open in case all other containers on the pod die. I cannot answer. I need to get informed myself. Sorry for that, Rahit. What are some use cases for vCluster? That's a good question. So let's say that for one reason or another, you need many different clusters. You need to give a cluster to each team, or maybe to each individual. And creating many different real physical clusters is expensive, because you need, if they're going to, you need control plane nodes, they're the overhead, and it takes time to create them. Now you might say, why do we need separate clusters? Why not namespaces? And the answer to that question lies in the fact that almost everything in Kubernetes today uses custom resource definitions with their own controllers. So if you install Argo CD, you're going to get controllers and CRDs. If you use MongoDB as well, and so on and so forth. And the thing is that those are cluster level resources. They are not within a namespace. So what that really means is that you very often cannot limit that everything that somebody needs is contained in a namespace. And when that happens, people are going to start overwriting each other's stuff. And you need more than a namespace. You might need a cluster, and then virtual cluster comes into play. And vCluster specifically is my choice. So let's say that you want to give every person in your company a remote cluster to work with, right? Complete freedom, or each team, or different tenants, different customers maybe. And it might be too slow or too expensive to do that with real clusters. Example, in the company where I work in, we give people control planes with Crossplane and stuff. And for us, giving every single person that requests it a real cluster so that they can have a control plane would be just overkill. We don't use vCluster though, we use our own stuff, but the logic is still the same. Do you think about that so many Kubernetes related tools at this moment that became a problem for adoption? Yes, that's the price of innovation. It's very hard to follow. Too many things are happening. Too many things are coming. So then that's both positive and negative thing. It's positive that we have so many different individuals and teams and companies competing and trying to be more innovative than others. But that means that selecting tools you're going to use is harder than ever. Now, to be honest, I do not want to go to the days like 30 years ago when most companies had everything from one company, from IBM or from Oracle or from wherever, because that was innovation killer, right? That's when you, that's how you end up having mainframes still. But it's complicated, yeah. You might want to get, somebody to guide you, like Red Hat, for example, is going to give you a bunch of different tools, not all of them theirs, many of them not theirs, but kind of guides you towards what you might want to use. Hey, Bogdan, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the seeker. We have, 10 more minutes. Let's see. Any thoughts on SUSE Harvester? Did not spend sufficient time to judge it yet. Only rudimentary knowledge, and I have a rule. I need to go deeper into something before judging it. What is the difference between controller or operators? Same thing. Essentially the same thing. What is the best approach to implement GitOps in multi-team project? If each app repo have their own life cycle, how to automate, and what are the best practices to update GitOps resources? Let me see whether I get this. If each app repository have their own life cycle, how to... So, typically, the manifests that are monitored by GitOps tools are not in the repositories of applications, right? That's why at the very beginning of today's session, I said, you have Argo CD manifest in a repository together with other Argo CD manifests for production, for staging, and so on and so forth. And they are referencing the base manifests in an application. Making changes to repository of an application does not really trigger GitOps synchronization. Pushing changes to those repositories that define environments that are referencing those manifests from the app repo, that triggers change. And you can do it either from your pipelines, Jenkins or whatever you might be using. At one moment you say, I want to deploy, what do? You clone a repository, you modify that Argo CD or Flux manifest, you push it back, and that's where the synchronization happens. Or you set up rules, like you have Argo CD image updater that will monitor your container image registry. And whenever a new tag is created that follows certain rules, and rules, you define rules, like, hey, if it has dash staging, then it goes to staging, or everything goes everywhere, and so on and so forth. So try Argo CD image updater, or do it by pipelines. Just separate GitOps repos from the application repos, and manifests also. Make sure that you know what is where. Is there any IDP out of the box buy that ever really fit into bigger company needs? My management thinks it can buy something, but they don't see the complexity of integration. I don't think that there is any out of the box IDP that really fits into bigger company needs. I don't think that such a thing exists. I think that that's why Heroku failed. I mean, it still exists, but it's nowhere near its previous glory, or all other similar attempts failed. So you have basically two choices. Oh, thanks, Matthias. I really appreciate it. You have two choices. One is get something highly opinionated, and then you adapt to that something. How much it will take to adapt to that something depends, really. The bigger the company, the more expensive adapting to highly opinionated solution is. The smaller company, it's easier because you can say, hey, I'm starting a new company today. I'm going to use Heroku or something like that, and I'm going to do things from the start, from day zero, as Heroku wants me to do it, or similar tools. Bigger company doesn't work like that, right? There is a history. You already have processes, you have things, and you cannot adapt to a solution. You need to build your own. And so I suggest getting a tool that will enable you to build IDP. Do not build it from scratch ever, but get tools that will allow you to build your own IDP that fits your needs. Again, this is now a plug for my company, but only because I'm doing it only when somebody asks. That's what we're trying with Crossplane. That's what Backstage, for example, is helping with. Humanitech is also in that business. So there are quite a few tools that allow you to build your IDP, not from scratch, never from scratch, but to adapt to have less opinionated tools that allow you to generate tools that will be highly opinionated as you want them to be. I'm an IT operations engineer, and I want to move to a DevOps role. I know Linux, Docker, Ansible, and a bit of Terraform. I'm now learning Kubernetes. Do you have any advice to speed up the learning? I don't know, sleep less. I'm not good at advices on how to learn because I'm disorganized, I'm chaotic. I just do random things, and that some of those things end up being good. But switching into Kubernetes is the good thing about Kubernetes, and why I would focus on Kubernetes, is the only thing that is almost certainly common in almost all the companies, right? You can learn AWS, and then some other companies where you apply to works with Azure, right? Or Google, or on-prem, or this or that. You can use tool X for something and for pipelines, and then the company uses Y. But Kubernetes, that's a common denominator. So if you want a skill that is most widely applicable today, That's Kubernetes. Now, of course, you should understand Linux. You already do. What is missing here is programming. I think that the days when we had engineers of any kind that are not writing code are gone or going away slowly. So I suggest to add to that list, I don't know, Go or Python or some language. Not necessarily to dedicate your life to programming, but certain level is very, very desirable. Okay, 5 more minutes. Hello, what is the best solution for placing stateful application within dynamic Kubernetes ideology? The deal is to reach maximum SLI percentage. It really depends on the type of application. If it's stateful application that has state inside that application, then I strongly recommend moving the state to the database. You're going to be, because if you want to run in Kubernetes and get benefits of Kubernetes, as opposed to being stuck in a single VM, you need to figure out how to scale that something. You need to figure out how to synchronize the state between different replicas of that application and so on and so forth. That's what databases are doing. And that's the hard part. So instead of figuring out how to place your stateful application inside Kubernetes, I suggest figure out how you can move the state of that application to a database. Do you recommend managing authentication, rate limiting, etc. REST API app running in backend on Kubernetes using native Ingress resources? Or should I use a separate API gateway management tool like Kong Gateway or Tuk? I'm not sure with Tuk, I haven't used it, but let me see, managing authentication, rate limiting. In general, that's what, you cannot do it only with the gateway. Unless your applications are really, you have only one front-end application, nothing else. Gateways normally are for the incoming traffic, and they're going to your whatever is public-facing application that you have. But then after it gets there, it goes throughout the rest of the system. That application might be calling another internal application, it calls 3 other applications, so on and so forth. So those requests are traveling after they reach the first point of entry throughout the system, right? And that's why you want service mesh, any service mesh, whichever, from Kong or Istio or Linkerd, or just pick a service mesh and stick with it. Oh, Christopher Wick joined. Thank you, Chris. Long time no see, Chris, though. Okay, this and one more question. Kubernetes versus OpenShift. I prefer Kubernetes versus OpenShift, generally speaking. OpenShift is great. The support you get from Red Hat is great. It's good for enterprises, but I don't like that OpenShift is the one that diverges the most from Kubernetes, from other Kubernetes distributions, right? Meaning that you are stuck with OpenShift more than you're stuck with any other Kubernetes distribution. If you use EKS, you will be able to switch to Rancher, or from Rancher to AKS, what's not, right? OpenShift is more different. And so if I would have to make a blank statement, then Kubernetes. I mean, OpenShift is Kubernetes. Let's clarify that. OpenShift is Kubernetes. So the question is really OpenShift or other Kubernetes distributions. And then depends on the other Kubernetes distribution. But if I would have to make a choice, then yeah, not OpenShift. But that's my personal thing. I understand how valuable OpenShift is for big enterprises. So, is it possible scan in live any container image with admission controller? Yes, that's no. So you don't scan. Depends what you mean by live. So admission controllers are run when you send a request to Kube API. So if by scan live any container image means when you request when you request from Kube API to update your deployment with the new image, then yes, admission controllers can do that. Admission controllers can initiate any process, including scanning of the image that is there. Now, by live, you've been periodically scanning images of applications that are running in Kubernetes, not only when you request something from Kube API, then that would not be admission controller. Okay, I think we're on top of the hour. I'm sorry that I have to stop here. Actually, this is amazing chat. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you for all those of you who joined the channel. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you so much. But unfortunately, I have a meeting at the top of the hour that I need to attend, so I will have to stop. See you in 2 weeks.